Hi guys. How you guys doing? So I I think I've been living in Arizona now for was it? It's been like it hasn't even been a week yet, but I'd say it's been close to a week that I've been living in Arizona. I currently live with a big family. um, I'm you could say my living situation is I'm basically renting a room, and it's a huge dynamic change. um, there's kids running around, and a lot of pets, and the kids love me. So it's a different dynamic. I've also been very busy, just applying for jobs. I applied for school, so I got into my school. I sent all my transcripts. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm really. I actually went to an interview yesterday for like this nursing job, but I'm not really into it, to be honest. Um, Even though I have like a nursing license, I don't really want to do that kind of work. So my line of thought right now is that I think the best course of action will be to kind of just go to school full time. Get money from the GI Bill. This would be like sort of the benefits from serving in the army for so long. At least for me, it's 6 years. That's a long time. Maybe not for some people, but it's long enough for me. Um, I did have to go to the hospital at least one more time when I got here. Um, I still was struggling with a lot of like gut issues and stuff like that, but it seems like I'm finally getting a handle on the gut issues. So that's seems like it's working. Of course, it's a lifestyle change on top of that. But yeah, so yeah, I've been really busy. I've I've also found a church that um, I'm gonna look into it more. I think I'm gonna go to the mass on Sunday or something like that. And yeah, I mean, just a lot of things that happen with transition and move. I mean, I'm trying to get an updated driver's license, driver's registration, all this stuff. So a lot of my work, a lot of my philosophical thinking has kind of been put to the side for a little bit for now. But doesn't mean I've stopped thinking. Or occasionally I run into interactions that kind of make me contemplate uh, specific things. And one of the things that I actually one of the things that kind of sparked my mind a little bit was this idea. And I was watching the talk with Owen Cox and I forgot his name. I want to say Rob. Um, I don't know the other guy's name now, but they were talking about they basically had like a discussion about the hero myth and the heroic tragedy. I mean, well, not the heroic tragedy, but the tragedy, the tragic myth, right? The tragic, um, and they kept bringing up this concept about this sort of aim towards paradise. Now, granted, I didn't finish all of the talk that Owen Cox had with the other guy's name, on the video about the hero myth and tragedy. But immediately it already sparked thoughts because they kept using this idea of paradise. And I kept asking myself, I think we need to tackle what we mean. It's either that we need to tackle what we mean by paradise, or we need to revive or kind of, deconstruct, reconstruct, I don't know which word to use, the notion of paradise. And because fundamentally, I think whatever myth we're talking about, whether it's a hero's mythology or a sort of tragic myth, and I know Owen Cox actually brings up Oedipus Rex for the tragedy, and about this is basically straight from Owen Cox. I actually haven't read Oedipus Rex, but so I'm kind of leaning here on what I've heard, so I could be wrong, but from what I recall is that Owen Cox said that Oedipus Rex had intended to do good, and then it kind of just blew up in his face. And so I guess this is what Owen Cox would call like tragic, a tragic notion. But what, and so this is my, I guess you could say this is like the dilemma that I'm raising, is that what we deem as tragic, or what we deem as a hero's myth, I wanted to either reconstruct this or look at this a different way, because I think fundamentally what we have to realize that is like something that is in paradise is that it fundamentally has to do with like poverty, and our helplessness. So just by using Owen Cox's example of Oedipus Rex wanting to do good, and yet it blows up in his face, and this is something tragic. I think what actually makes it tragic, in my opinion, it's not that Oedipus Rex is trying to do good and it doesn't work. It's actually that Oedipus Rex thinks he can do anything at all. It's basically not understanding, or not having any understanding of your own poverty, of your own helplessness. And when you come to face with the real, thinking that you can actually do something, thinking that you can actually do something on your own, whatever concept of good that you think that you're doing, if you fail to recognize that actually there is an overwhelming amount of helplessness and just futility, almost, this is tragic, right? This is tragic. When you don't realize that, when you don't realize the state of lack that we are fundamentally in. And I know this is, and I know this is a very different understanding of like how to, think this, but I just thought this was like a sort of unique take. Maybe it might not even be unique, but I thought it was interesting that, like, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to state like a historical case or cite stories. I'm saying that actually, if this is true or not true, what I want to say is that I feel like actually a proper hero's myth is actually realizing your state of poverty, realizing your helplessness. And so that that, when you accept that, when you acknowledge that, that sort of transforms itself into sort of a more optimistic ending. But I don't even like the idea of endings as such. But yeah, and so tragedy, in my opinion, is something that where the main character, and I'm just using Oedipus Rex from what Owen Cox had said, as sort of like the character of this tragedy is someone trying to do good and it blows up in his face. That what you can see with this is it's a character that doesn't acknowledge properly his own helplessness and his own state of poverty. It's this idea of thinking that you can do something. So basically what I'm saying is it's this idea of like thinking that you can do something without the real, or you can do something to change the real. And so I think this is the tragedy point. Of course, this is a very fresh idea, but fundamentally, I really thought that, yes, I think that the real tragedy is when we sort of deny, in some fashion, our helplessness, our, the futility of the situation, and to stress more of a theological point of view, where like, there's actually a very interesting point of comparison here. Like if Oedipus Rex did something, tried to do something good, and this thing blows up all on his face, and it turns out, horrible and bad. And so we call that a tragedy. But actually, when you bring up a theological point of view, just the intent of doing something good is actually not a tragedy in itself. So I found that a very interesting point of contrast, where when you have a theological position, for example, like a God, just trying to do good, appease the situation, right? And let's say it does blow up in your face. Without a God, that's tragic. It's a tragic story, actually. But with a God, whether the story actually becomes tragic, even the idea of doing good and it falls on your face, it doesn't fall on the face of the real. It still holds. And so, in essence, the story isn't tragic. But again, it's a very interesting. I thought that was a very interesting comparison, because I was like, yeah, I mean, at least from what Owen Cox had said, right? It can be. I mean, it is tragic. At least when you read this, read the story. I'm assuming. I haven't actually read it, but I'm prefacing off this from what I saw and heard. But either way, and even if I were to, I don't even have to talk about Oedipus Rex. I can talk about more of a biblical narrative, like Peter. Peter was one of the apostles. He gets crucified upside down, so that's an interesting take. What's up?
Nothing to go to school.
All right. So it's the apostles. See it? So it's the apostles, right? Peter gets crucified upside down. My train of thought. Okay, yes. Peter gets crucified upside down, right? Actually, I want to say Peter's, if you look at his end state without a God, right, it's actually sort of tragic. that he gets kind of crucified upside down, even though people could say, well, maybe it's not really tragedy because it's like a martyr type of aspect, but that's including the theological notion, right? If we talk about Peter without a theological notion, it's actually tragedy. It's complete tragedy, in my opinion, right? Because Peter is someone that tries to do good, and then essentially he gets crucified, but he gets crucified upside down, just sort of mimic his master, but out of honor. But again, that still has it's hard to think it without a theological notion already. So maybe that's why it's a bad example. But I think you guys get what I'm saying. Anyways, yeah, that's basically the premise. But other than that, yeah, I'll talk to you guys. I'll talk to you guys more. So yeah, stay tuned. All right, guys, take care.